Hello. You guys know how excited I am for this, to be able to have this conversation. I really wanted to be able to talk about beverages and spirits and industry and all how it connects to Blackness, right? Because everything I love to talk about is connected to Blackness. And so I was thinking, how can we do a fun spilling the tea with Dr. P in a real innovative and kind of creative way? And I was like, you know what? Why don't we talk about spirits and Black history and mental health and the intersection of all three of those? So super excited for you guys to be joining us tonight, for our audience to be joining us, and also, of course, for me to be able to chat it up and spill the tea with Torrence and with Tracy and with Ariel. So I'm going to give each of you guys an opportunity to introduce yourselves and how you guys kind of know each other and the connections that we all have, and then we're going to get into the conversation. We could start off with Torrence. For some of you guys that are in the audience or who know me really well, you know my brother Torrence, and Torrence and I go way back numbers of years now, through different careers and different decisions in our life, and through babies and all sorts of fun things. And Torrence is my go-to for all things related to spirits, whether it's connected specifically with cocktails or it's wines or, you know, whatever the case may be. And so I guess I could go on and on, right, Torrence? So let me stop talking and send it right over to Torrence. And then from Torrence, we'll go to Tracy. And from Tracy, we'll round out with Ariel and then get into some of our questions. So, hey, brother.
How's it going?
What's up with you?
It's always a pleasure to be with you, Doctor. I am completely and just overjoyed about your success, and watching you grow has just been a pleasure. So it's definitely a privilege to be here amongst some Black excellence, you know.
Hey,
so
now.
Yes, I'm going to raise my glass to you. I'm Torrence Swain. I am a career bartender. I think that was my destiny. I have transcended over into brand work in the last 3 or 4 years full time, but I still enjoy teaching and in creating cocktails with my friends and for my family, and as well as teaching, you know, people I've never met before. So I do that virtually or in person. I've done it at your house, Dr. Plummer. So I've found my place, and that's in beverages. But even though I work in this industry, I do believe wholeheartedly in responsible consumption and thoughtful and mindful consumption. That's something that I live by on a day-to-day basis. And I'm here with my family.
Yes.
Some that I see all the time and some that I see every now and then, Tracy.
Absolutely. Thank you, Torrence. And let's go right over to Tracy. Oh, are we cheers? Are we doing cheers? Cheers to Torrence?
Cheers. And we do a cheers every time somebody talks. We go.
That's true.
Well, we're only working out of one glass, which is still quite responsible. Yes. Okay. Hey, Tracy. Hey, girl.
Hey, thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Tracie Franklin. I'm known as Spirited Tracy on social media, and I am currently a head distiller apprentice for the Nearest in Jack Advancement Initiative. I'm working at numerous distilleries across the United States and working on my diploma in distillation, really to head up a distillery in the future. So really excited. Now, like I said, that's Jack Daniels and Uncle Nearest are the sponsors of this program, this charity that I am a part of. So I am sipping on a little bit of Uncle Nearest tonight.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. You know, I'm so excited to talk about Uncle Nearest too. Like, especially in the context of Black history. So super excited. Thank you.
And it's a wonderful way for us to tie the spirits back to our ancestors, back to our health and our respect. And so.
Absolutely. So cheers to Tracy.
Cheers.
And let's hear from Ariel. Hey, girl.
Hello.
You looking real nice and festive. Where are you coming out of today?
So at the moment I am in Cancun, but I've come from Tulum.
Oh, nice. I'm jealous. Maybe you can change your angle just slightly so I don't see the sunlight and the beautiful plants.
Oh, okay. Let's see if I can get this. How's this?
Excuse my hateration. Go ahead. Do your view how you want to, honey. Do your view.
Hello, hello, hello. Thank you so much for having me. This is awesome. I'm very excited to be here. Hi, Tracy. Hi, Torrence. I'm definitely amongst family. My name is Ariel Neal. I am the owner and operator of Leira Cocktails, and we've just added retreats. And so, what I do best is connect people through cocktails. However that is. I do events. I do a lot of corporate events, and I do some education with brands. And it has brought me a lot of joy, lots of mentees, and lots of opportunities to connect with people all over the world, actually.
Yeah. Welcome, Ariel. Cheers to Ariel.
Thank you.
Now, to those of you who are watching, you know this is Spillin a Tea with Dr. P. And you might wonder what's in my cup, but I'm not going to tell you to the end. Maybe it's tea. Anyhow, let's go ahead and get into
Long
this.
Island iced tea.
Right? What did you say?
Long Island iced tea.
It's something in there. Listen, it might be that Long Island. So one of the things I was really curious about, so one of the things that I get an opportunity to do, and I'm sure you guys get the opportunity too, is to go into different schools, high schools, universities, etc., and do these career days. And some of the things that I find is that the career days are always talking about very specific kind of careers, right? Like doctors, lawyers, engineers, but they don't get to talk about the creative careers, right? They don't get to talk about what it means to be creative in the spirits industry, or what it means to be creative in these different type of ways. One of the things that really brought me to the conversation too is because of my work and my relationship with Torrence, and I see how he puts things together and the sensories that come connected to that. But the connection to all of that I'm saying is that most people don't understand how to enter into this particular industry, right? How do you get into the creative art of making spirits, or how do you get into the corporate part of the spirit industry? So I like for each of you guys to tell us a little bit about how and what brought you into this particular industry, into the spirits industry. And we could start with Tracy. You want to go first this time?
Absolutely. Okay. So I think one of the things that is also something people don't understand is when we talk about the spirits industry, it's a giant corporation. So the spirits industry includes every type of job. You know what I mean? So there's HR people, there's accountants, there are, there are industries. So I think a lot of people don't even think about the fact that, oh, I'm in accounting, but I could still support and work in the spirits industry. And that just that environment in itself is really very different and just much more open and maybe not as corporate as some other places might be. So just another way to look at ways you can do your same job, but within spirits. So just wanted to put that out there. But I came into spirits because I was working as a singer and dancer. I was auditioning in New York, and so I'd be in town for a month and then gone for 6 months. And bartending was the way that I was earning money, and I fell in love with whiskey. Once I realized that there was really nobody else like me teaching about whiskey, there really weren't a lot of people in the classes learning about whiskey, I started a group, a marketing company that created events to reach out to different groups and just create a diverse whiskey community. So from that, kind of my name got known. I became an ambassador for Glenfiddich Scotch and became the only national black and woman ambassador for single malt Scotch, and the first I know of in the United States as a black woman on Scotch. And then I had the opportunity to step away from this thing that, being visible, being this representative, and to be able to be on the process side. So now I'm going to be able to actually distill and put my palate and my stories, to really rewrite the legacy of American whiskey. So that's how I got there. Really, it was just the side hustle that I really loved. And then the opportunities kind of kept occurring. But I also say, do what you love, and it can lead to spirits. Pursue what you love, and don't think that it has to be separate, because we do have a lot of different type of people and types of jobs.
Mm-hmm. So what I hear you saying is that you were bartending on the side, and then got introduced into another realm and took hold of that. Yeah. Is that right? So how did that? Go ahead.
Yeah, just because, so usually when you're bartending, you don't work for a specific brand, right? You can, every now and then you can like take side gigs, but your bartending job is usually the main way you're making money. So then I started actually learning about whiskey and being able to teach that. So more of a private sort of entity, working with an exclusive agency that then hired me out. So that was a different side of the industry. Yeah.
Yeah, real quick, tell me about that pivotal moment where you were like, I really like this whiskey and I want to learn more. Tell me what that moment was like.
I mean, it's always been so I grew up a military brat. My father was Air Force, traveled the world, and one of the things my father always brought home was his experiences with like the cuisine of these other countries. Mm-hmm. So when he came home, we lived in California, so we would seek out all of these different restaurants for this flavor. So I grew up eating everything, like all cultures, all foods, anything we could find. And so I've always sought out flavor. And for me, whiskey was I could like have a glass of whiskey, sip it all night, it had tons and tons of flavor. So I wanted to find out more about why these flavors were so different. What were the stories behind this? What is the history, the tradition, the processes? And as I learned more and more, I really just fell in love with it. It's like how wine people love it because it's the same base ingredients, but there's a whole world to explore.
And that's so Black, right, Tracy? Like what attracted you to whiskey was the flavor. It was the way that it tastes. It was the sensory element. And as Black people, that's what we are, right? It's why we use the seasoning salt. It's why we use the pepper. It's why we use all of these things. It's why our seasoning cabinets are full all the time because we want to have that full, savory, sensory kind of experience. And what I hear you saying is that you found that in whiskey, right? And I wonder how many people, and maybe the audience could talk to us a little bit about that, how many people choose their spirit of choice based off of the actual sensory element of it, the flavor, like how you break down the different not products per se. What would be the correct term? The different ingredients.
Yeah, that flavors and aromas, because the raw materials give you all different flavors to play with.
Yeah, I love it, Tracy. Come on with your own Black history, girl. You know we're gonna have to talk about this Black woman ambassador for a Scotch brand. I'm like, okay, girl. Hey, friend. I'm here for it. Ariel, talk to me a little bit about what brought you into the industry as well.
So my grandmother was the hostess with the mostest. When I grew up, I assumed all these people that came to her house were cousins and relatives, and they were not. And I figured that out because they didn't come to my birthday party, so I was very disappointed. But what she was an incredible hostess, and she made wine, she cooked, she brought out the best of the best, and I saw hospitality first. I learned how to cook. I learned how to do all of these things. Fast forward, I'm going to hair school, and I realized that I don't have enough money to finish hair school and really live. And I said, you know what, I will, because I've always kind of bartended. I say kind of because I didn't have any structure. I did a little bit of this and a whole lot of that. It was good. People told other people, and I was your residential bartender for home parties or whatever. I did work at structured places for a little bit. But if I couldn't own that space, if I couldn't take it over, it was only short lived. So these were, a friend needed a bartender for a week or so, or I knew a guy that knew a guy, that type of situation. Fast forward to me actually going to school and like having to have another income, and I said, okay, I'll bartend at this one place, and it was a place that really gave me structure. This is the first time I'm doing like a for real cocktail program with craft cocktails. And I got my first paycheck, which was nothing, by the way, but I loved it so much. I never finished hair school, and I've just been in the industry ever since. And, just finding a way for myself and other people who look like that.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's another beautiful connection to spirits and cocktails and Black history, right? Because how many of us actually grew up with our parents and our grandparents just hosting the parties, right? Like where we're running around the house in our pajamas while aunties and uncles are downstairs drinking and partying and having a good time. And what's interesting about that, Ariel, when we think about it in terms of mental health, it's probably the energy and the feeling that you had that made you connected to this hostess element, right? Like the house feels warm, everybody is positive, everybody is loving, everybody is having a good time. How do I continue to recreate that in my own personal life and get the satisfaction? Because like you mentioned, that first paycheck wasn't the motivating factor. It was the satisfaction that you had, the connection to the people that you had, the connection to the experience that you had that kept you kind of coming back, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay, brother, what's going on with you?
I mean, just hustling.
Tell us your story.
Okay. I think we all share the same beginning in that it was out of necessity that we started bartending, right? So, you know, I moved here in 2009, Washington D.C. area, Washington D.C. to be exact. I started serving in a Buffalo Wild Wings, and I ended up being a bartender there. And just like with anything, I just want to be the best at whatever I'm doing. And I just became like a hallmark behind that bar. One, because I really love football. So, you know, my love for football and my attention to detail and hospitality that I kind of inherited from my grandmother made me into a popular bartender at that spot. And there was a huge cross section of people that watch football. So I met a lot of people. And then, you know, I bartended at a couple of jazz clubs in the area, in the Prince George's County area, which gave me exposure to, you know, even that much more of a spectrum of people. And then I found myself in Georgetown running a program, my first craft program. And, you know, I know that I'm Black history because, like, when I started bartending in the craft programs, there were not a lot of Black bartenders. But because of the tenacity of, you know, what I call the generation that you're seeing in front of us, there was like maybe one before us where we had a few pioneers, but I think we kind of kicked the door open because all of us have extended our hand to the next ones who wanted to be in, and we made sure that they got through, you know, because there wasn't many before us that could give us the opportunity or the hand up because they were hustling on their own. So, you know, it's, and then I became a brand ambassador for a mezcal company. And at the time, I can almost say with almost 100% certainty that I'm still the only Black man working in mezcal. Now, I've recruited some Black women into the world of mezcal, but I really honestly feel like I'm the only Black man that you can say works for a mezcal company still. And it's been almost 7 years now that I've been in the game. And I opened the East Coast for the brand that I work for, Silencio, and it's been no turning back since then. So I'm totally grateful. You know, yeah. I'm definitely amazed that I can even be in the same conversation with people like Ariel and Tracy, who I've adored before I knew them, you know. So it's like, you know, it's kind of surreal at times, but you know, I just remain grateful. But this journey has been, it takes a lot of determination. You know, there's a lot of external factors that people don't realize that, you know, when you're dealing with like the externals of your companies, like trying to get buyers to bring in your spirit or trying to get your distributor to answer their phone and things like that. Those are all like that world of like microaggressions that you run through when you're trying to get your job done, you know? Mm-hmm. And in speaking to Tracy and in speaking to Ariel all the time, like that's just part of the job, mm-hmm. you know? So yeah. No complaints, but it's just part of the landscape.
Yeah. I am so proud of you and so proud of all of you all. What I heard you also saying, Torrence, is that what brought you into the industry was this element of survival, but then also how your personality just kept kind of attracting people to you and into where you were working, and that kind of got your name out there, right? So, and I think that, like I mentioned before, you know, in thinking about careers, sometimes, especially as Black people, we go into industries a lot of times because of survival. because we don't always have this generational wealth. We don't always have these parents that we could kind of fall back on. And we're like, what is the quickest and safest way that we can get money so that we can accomplish our dreams? And everybody has their own motivations for getting into different work and industries. But I'm so excited to see how there was this intersection between your elements of survival and passion, and how you guys are now in these positions where you're able to lead and you're able to open doors and you're able to trailblaze. You're able to not just market yourself and advertise the brands that you're working for, but you're able to bring other Black people into it. And so as we get into the conversation more with Tracy around, whiskey, or get more into the conversation with Torrence around mezcal, and Ariel more in terms of how you bring it all together to create businesses and things like that, I think it's positive as we look at what it means to be Black in industries where we often don't see our faces, right? We see somebody else's face, and we are consumers of such spirits, but we're not always represented there. So excited that you guys get to trailblaze for the folks that are coming right there behind you. I want to talk a little bit about, before we get too deep into it, I need to know what y'all are drinking. So what's in those glasses? We have toasted and cheers and all those things. Ariel, let's start with you. What are you consuming responsibly tonight? And tell me about the sensory experience of making and consuming that particular beverage.
So I'm not going to pretend like I made this at all, but I am consuming a mojito, and the rum that's in here is Florida Sangria. This is an amazing rum. I think it's, I don't
Nicaragua.
know. It is Nicaragua. Yes, but I think that this age statement is like 6 years, I believe. I'm not sure. But it's absolutely delicious. When I order cocktails, it is, most people say if it has an age statement on it, you're supposed to drink it by itself. You are to drink what you want to drink, however you want to drink it, the way that you want to drink it. And even though this is a mixed drink, I am not getting ready to put just anything in my body. And so I know how this is made. I know where it's made, and I watch the person make it. And also, I really adore cocktails that are 2 to 3 touches. So this is very simple. Some lime, some mint, and some sugar. And here we have it.
Okay. I know about the 2 to 3 touches because I think when was it? Maybe in the winter time, Torrence came to the house and he did a cocktail class for me and some of my line sisters. And so he talked to us about the touches a little bit too. He did a what was that, Torrence? A self-care series where we talked about the touches, like what that means. Tell us a little bit about the age statement for those that are interested.
So an age statement means that it was rested in a barrel for a certain amount of time. So basically, this is where you're getting a lot of your flavor. This is where the spirit absorbs into the wood and takes on some of the characteristics of where it comes from. So we know that rum is in a very warm, hot climate. So this is going to be caramely, molasses, dark, rich. Think of like Caribbean flavor, but character as well. So we're going to have some plantains. We're going to have some tropical fruits sometimes, and it's going to be amazing and delicious. Also, because we're paying special attention to what we're putting in our body, when you drink really great spirits, the need to have more than 2 ounces at a time is you don't need all of that. You basically are making a great cocktail with great products, and so a little goes a long way. Think of it as being heavily concentrated.
Say it again for the audience in the back, Ariel. Say it again.
A little bit goes a long way.
So what I also heard you say is that the quality of what you're consuming doesn't mean if you're choosing something with a higher quality, then you don't need to consume a lot of it. Maybe sometimes people overconsume when they're not paying attention to their senses, right? They're not paying attention to their taste, and they're not paying attention to what they're experiencing in their body, but also they're not necessarily paying attention because of the quality of it, right? So they're just hurrying it up, trying to drink it. Maybe it's a lower quality. They're over mixing it and they're just consuming it. And then in the end, they find themselves trying to tip out of a place and it's because they consumed a little too much.
This is definitely a sipping rum. This is not anything that you want to shoot. I personally don't like shooting because I want to taste everything. And I want to appreciate the people who made it. And I want to appreciate where it comes from and how it got here. So I'm not a shooter. But for those people who are, no judgment there, but just allow yourself to absorb some of the wonderful things that come in bottles from different places where these people, for years, blood, sweat, and tears, making rum and things like that.
And Ariel, I heard you say that oftentimes rum is created in these. You highlighted the Caribbean, right?
Yeah,
which is a place of black and brownness, right? You're talking about the sugar that's in there and the molasses that are in there. And we recognize that through the diaspora, many of our ancestors ended up in the Caribbean and they ended up with sugar and they ended up with sugar cane, right? And they ended up with these spirits. Just real quick, right? Like not a super long research history dissertation of sorts, but tell me a little bit about the blackness behind rum.
So to be quite honest, you cannot have a spirit like that has not been touched by black and brown people, period, and point blank. Sometimes we get into the marketing element of these spirits and forget where they came from and how people have been making this for years upon years upon years. Some of other people just now found out about it, but we've been doing this for a very long time. This is how we, made a living. This is how we fed our children. This is the way in which some of these countries have been capitalized, or people come over there and decide to destroy things that are very precious and extremely important to the resources and the value of being in that place. So I would like to say that we need to spend a little bit more time figuring out where these spirits come from and how they're made and who's making them. Because by and large, it has been black faces, brown faces, black and brown hands throughout history.
Yeah. And what I hear you saying with that is not just the surface level of, we know that the Caribbean is largely black, right? Like we know what happened with their slave trade and all of those kind of things. But even in order to make the rum, which has a large sugar content in it, there were black people that were mending those sugar canes. There were black people that were in those fields. There were black people.
Yeah.
Go ahead, tell me.
Farms. Yeah. They are their farms, right? And they're, pretty much lending their resources to other places. And it's kind of amazing how sometimes we understand where it comes from. We just don't realize like the time, the energy, and the power it takes to make these amazing spirits that are, hospitality was built on the backs of slaves. So I would love to spend a lot of time. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time here. But just understanding that and why and how we've been kind of like pushed out of our industry. And I say our industry because by and large, bartenders, servers, all of those were people of color, period.
From the beginning, right? Like even some of these old slave masters who got famous based off of their own networking and based off of what they were able to bring to their communities. It was largely part of their entertainment process too, right? Where they had their slaves that were making the dishes and making the cocktails and out creating the ambiance for them to be able to entertain. You got some over there? In fact, look, because Torrence, I get all nerdy and stuff. Thank you, Eric. Torrence, go ahead and take it to the next level for me. Tell me a little bit about what you're drinking.
Okay, well.
No, tell me the book, and then tell me what you're drinking.
This book is The Ideal Bartender by Tom Bullock, who was a very prominent black bartender. That this more or less highlights what Ariel was saying about how hospitality was a black thing. It was very much our thing. It's what white folks didn't want to serve. So who served? We did. So if you look at...
Can I interrupt for 1 second? It wasn't that they wanted to serve. They felt that it was inferior. Mm-hmm. So we needed to serve because we were, our country was built on a slave mentality. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't.
And even that is interesting, right? Because hospitality for Black people was still of a higher social economic status than being out in the field. So where some white folks didn't necessarily want to serve, some folks really wanted the opportunity to serve, right? And didn't always get the opportunity for that for a number of reasons. It may have been colorism. It may have been access. It may have been, can they read the ingredients? It may have been their ableism, right? Can you smell the ingredients? Can you see the things? There were many reasons why I think Black people came into the industry, and also why some weren't able to stay in the industry. And then politically, we have our own positions and perspectives around why we can't stay in the industry now as well. But yeah. So Torrence, go ahead and tell us about the book and tell us about what you're drinking.
It's just highly ironic because I really had to fight to get into a craft cocktail program. And this book, who the forward is by another fabulous, fantastic Black bartender and also international rum extraordinaire, Ian Burrell, who is he's a legend unto himself. But Tom Bullock wrote this book that has all these cocktails in it, and I was just like, man, I had to get in sideways to be a bartender in Washington, D.C., even though I had all the skill sets. So, it's very ironic that we have to, as Black people, fight to get into an industry that was built upon us, like Ariel was saying, especially the rum trade. The entire rum trade wouldn't happen without slaves. So I am having a riff on a old fashioned with my new baby, Dahlia Tequila.
Tell us a little bit about this terminology, riff.
A riff is, an old fashioned is the first cocktail, arguably. Cocktail history is a little fuzzy sometimes because I think everybody was probably drunk when they were writing it. So, but the first cocktail was spirit, bitter, sugar, and water, right? So you can use that formula, and all the cocktails that we have in the world can trace their lineage back to that one simple formula. Mm-hmm. So I'm having just some tequila with some bitters. Instead of any kind of syrup, I use some Benedictine and some orange bitters. Stirred it lightly, and it's a light sipper. It's something that I can responsibly consume without getting too. I can actually enjoy it. One thing that I know, Tracy, part of her whole ministry to us was how to drink whiskey, right? And it's because of the process that it takes to bring these spirits to life, a lot of times we just glaze over them. We just don't pay attention. So, being able to sit, sip, and enjoy and experience all the hard work that goes to getting this liquid into a bottle, because it really is something to behold. And I would encourage anyone that's watching to visit either Kentucky or Mexico or the Caribbean or somewhere where spirits are being made, because it's quite a process.
Yeah. And isn't that the thing too, right? I had a couple folks that's in the mental health industry, and they were like, come on, Dr. Plummer, you really about to do a segment on mental health and spirits? Not with substance use disorder out here, not with alcoholism. And I was like, but the thing is we got to look at it differently. If I am anxious and I had a really rough day, then maybe I need to sit and go into the 2 to 3 touches, right? And I need to think about what mixes well with this, what goes well with that. And that in itself could bring me down, right? Some people may say, oh, but that's overthinking, but it's not if you have cocktails that you're comfortable with consistently. You have a go-to bitter, you have a go-to spirit, you know how to mix these things together, then that becomes relaxing, not necessarily the actual consumption, because you're not going to get the relaxation from the alcohol immediately, right? It's going to take a few minutes to settle into your body. So if you are intentional, meditative, if you will, about how you put these things together and the process that you use, Maybe you turn on a little bit of music, a little bit of jazz, or depending on what's going on in your life, you might turn on a little bit of twerk, and you're going to put it, a little bit of trap, you're going to put it together, and you're going to be intentional about what it looks like, right?
Right.
Torrence, tell me a little bit about mezcal. You mentioned that you are trailblazing in the industry as a Black man in the mezcal specific type of spirit. You definitely introduced me and some of my friends to mezcal. Tell us a little bit about what mezcal is, how it's different from tequila, and all that good stuff.
Mezcal is one of the. It's definitely the indigenous spirit of Mexico. It existed way before tequila. Tequila is a product of colonization of Spain. Mezcal was made by the Mayans in the southern parts of Mexico about 400 years before tequila even began. It was made from what is called pulque, which is a more or less an agave beer. It's just when you take agave nectar, water, and some other elements and you allow it to ferment, it becomes a very low ABV or low alcohol by volume liquid that is, it's also probiotic as well. You can still go to Mexico and drink pulque. It's delicious. It's great. But they took the pulque and then distilled it. Once distillation came to Mexico, and there's so many different ways that they say that distillation made it, but that was also a product of colonization. They started to make mezcal. The difference between tequila and mezcal, for just from a bird's eye view, is going to be the flavor profile. There's sometimes a really large smoke component that you find in the flavor profile of mezcal. And that comes from the production method, wherein they take the agaves and they put them in underground pits and then they cook them over open fires, much like you would see a large animal cooked in the ground. It's the same method, like if you've ever had lamb barbacoa, that's one way that they cook in ground. I know that Ariel was just telling me that she had some pork that had been cooked in the ground earlier in this week while she's been in Mexico. So ground cooking is definitely an ancestral and indigenous method used to cook the agaves, and then it's crushed and then distilled. So the thing about the difference is because tequila can only be made from one type of agave, it's normally cooked in steam ovens or brick ovens, and then it's distilled. Sorry. So that's going to be the main components that make them different. When Spain colonized Mexico, they ended up outlawing mezcal because they wanted to control the liquid. They wanted to control the commerce of it. So they couldn't, because mezcal was an indigenous spirit being made in the rural communities. To the point where at one point in time, mezcal was only made by mezcaleros that traveled across the countryside. And that's the reason why a mezcal distillery is called a palenque, because palenque translates to clearing. They would clear an area of land, distill a batch of mezcal, and then keep moving on. So that's pretty much how mezcal and tequila differ. If you ever get a chance to travel to southern Mexico, you can feel the ancestors.
Yeah.
Like, you honestly, they're there, and there's a lot of connective tissue between African and southern Mexican culture. It's all right there. It's quite phenomenal.
I mean, we all saw the census that came out a couple years ago, of which they just started acknowledging Black Mexicans, right? Like, it wasn't even part of their census before. And so for those that are watching in the audience are listening, like, you know, we were there. We were in Mexico. We were in Central America. You know, of course, we know Belize and we know Panama and Costa Rica because that's where our skin continued to show up. But we were in Mexico also, but we were more in the rural areas. And in some of these areas that Torrence is making reference to around something like mezcal, it's also interesting how mezcal at some point had been outlawed because they couldn't control it, right? But how we as Black and brown people continue to be persistent, right? And it's also funny how we even call these these spirits, because we tend to be spiritual people, constantly finding ways to connect to our ancestors. And sometimes these spirits allow for that too, not necessarily just in the consumption, but if we slow ourselves down a little bit, we can feel the presence around. I think even about my altar that I have in my house, when I'm about to go into the altar and I'm about to give offering to my ancestors, I'm giving them alcohol. I'm giving them spirits that I knew that they enjoyed as well. But that's a whole nother talk, right? Like the altar talk is a whole nother talk. But that is part of our experience as well. So what I hear so far with Ariel is that rum, in order to make the rum, some black and brown hands touched it, and in order to make mezcal, we have black and brown touching it as well. We have black and brown keeping it alive. Mezcal, from my experience, tends to be a little bit. It can have a different cost point, right? It's not what we always are used to paying for. But to Ariel's point, you only need a low quantity to really be able to enjoy it. So the smokiness of it and the feel of it makes you want to slow down and enjoy it sensory as well, sensorily as well. All right, Tracy, let's take you home with the whiskey. First, tell us what you are drinking and what you're sensing in your body, and then tell us a little bit about Uncle Nearest and about the companies that you work for as well.
So I am drinking Uncle Nearest, which, if you don't know, Uncle Nearest was the formerly enslaved man who taught a young Jack Daniels how to distill whiskey. Once Jack Daniels actually bought the distillery from Dan Call, Nathan Nearest Green was the first person he hired to become his master distiller. So he was a master distiller before the term even existed. And there has been a person from the Green family at the Jack Daniels distillery from the first time it opened through to today. So I am celebrating this. I'm drinking now Uncle Nearest, which was created by Fawn Weaver. So it is the first major spirits company, first and only major spirits company to be founded by a Black woman, and she also has an all-female executive board, and her funding is all minority-led. So really, this is a company that's just changing the way that spirits are thought about, the way spirits are being produced, the people that are associated with spirits. So this is also the first whiskey brand to honor a Black man. So if you think about all the bottles of whiskey on the back bar, if you think about the names that are there, they're not to honor a Black man, and definitely not an enslaved Black man. So that is something that I think that we all can pay homage to, right? And I'm excited because that's the legacy that I'm being supported by. That is with my current studies, and then hopefully a new story that I'm writing, because the American whiskey industry is only now starting to come to terms with its relationship with Black Americans in slavery and how we built that industry.
Yeah, Tracy, if we could back that up just a little bit and slow it down, because I was like, that is a whole class in like 3 minutes, right? So what I heard you say was that Jack Daniels, of which almost every Black person in America knows,
the number one selling American whiskey in the world.
Okay, all right. So we have Jack Daniels, number one selling whiskey in the world, was actually say it how you said it again. It was started by, supported by.
So Jack Daniels was a kid. So basically, Nathan Nearest Green was a slave on the Dan Call farm. At the Dan Call farm was a actual farm, the distillery, and a church. So because Dan Call was also a preacher, he stayed away from the distillery, which is why we know Nathan Nearest Green was running the distillery by his own, making him the head distiller. Jack Daniels was 9 years old. His mother died, and he left home and was working at the Dan Call farm. So as a kid, he started working with Nathan Nearest Green. Uncle Nearest is what he would have been called. He started working with Uncle Nearest, who taught him everything he knew about distillation. And Dan Call, again being a reverend, had finally got told he had to get rid of the still or else. So he sold the still to Jack Daniels, who moved it just a little bit of ways, and hired, because after the Civil War, that's when he got the still, hired Nathan Green to run it. So Uncle Nearest was actually running that still. And while Jack Daniels was doing most of the marketing actually at the beginning, and then his family, his sons took over, and it continued through that. Yeah.
So it was a slave who taught Jack Daniels, and then who eventually came and worked in that distillery, became the master distillery. So all that we know about the foundation of Jack Daniels is actually from a slave.
Yes.
But who didn't have the power to actually brand and keep his work to himself. He had to support.
It wasn't intended to keep to himself. He wouldn't have had the tools. He wouldn't have had that wouldn't have been. He wouldn't have had that ability. But understand, this wasn't as if Jack Daniels took advantage. Uncle Nearest was one of the highest paid people in Lynchburg. He had he owned a full block of property. They had plenty. So it wasn't as he was paid for his work. He was paid what a white man would have been paid. So one of the things that also was happening was they were paying you based on your time actually at the distillery versus your skin color. So it was one of the first times they'd actually seen something that was equity within a distillery. But so yes, if in other circumstances, in another world, maybe he would have been able to actually have owned a still and created a distillery. But even if we looked at the labor laws that were created out there, Black people couldn't own anything. Like, wouldn't have been able to own a still, wouldn't have been able to have that company. So instead, he was well paid, and that was, what can we say about how the history then played out? It's not really on anyone's fault. This was a relationship founded on respect, founded on mutual admiration. So I actually am kind of proud that exists in somewhere called Lynchburg, Tennessee. But actually the story of what they created is pretty beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It is. And so again, as we recap all of that, we know that rum, in order for that rum to be made, it was touched by Black and brown hands, right? In some type of form or fashion. If we talk about mezcal, we understand the indigenous spirit, not just the process, but the indigenous spirit that is still in that particular spirit. And then when we talk about these whiskey brands that we know that are well known, we know that the foundation and the creation of that was done by Black people too. And so when we as Black people are consuming these spirits, there's also a point of which we could take pride. We could take pride in what we know. We could take pride in Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks and all the folks. But we could also take pride when we are consuming responsibly our beverages too, because we know that our ancestors were involved and connected to that process as well. That's awesome.
Well, Tracy, sorry, I was like, especially if you look at the rates of slavery, like the rates of their increase, along with the growth of American whiskey, it is not just Jack Daniels. It is all of the major distilleries in Kentucky and Tennessee. You see where slave labor, where Black hands were used to grow this whiskey, to grow the corn, to stir the mash, to burn, run the still, all that heat, that fire, that sweat. It was hard work, and we know whose hands was doing that. So
yeah. And it's so powerful how you talk about the heat and the fire and the sweat, because that's what we know, right? Like, that's who Black people still are. We are fiery, and we are about working, and we are about making ourselves known and making sure that the work that we're doing is being appreciated, especially post-slavery, where we can finally start to get acknowledgement for what we're doing and for what our ancestors have been doing as well. Yeah, I love this. I love it. I love it. Let me talk a little bit. I have so many questions, right? For those of you guys who were not on, before we even started recording, I said, I want to talk about this and I want to talk about that. And Tracy said, girl, how? Girl, how are we doing this in an hour? And I said, we're going to do it. And Tracy, you're right. I don't think we're going to get all the questions, but maybe we can do a second segment and tie it into Women's History Month. I don't know. We'll find a way to do it. My team is amazing in that way. So they'll make a connection and we'll figure it out. Let me talk a little bit about, I'm going to try to be mindful of the time. In our community, we sometimes have bad connections with alcohol, right? And it's not just a matter of what we consume. It's also the socialization, right? Like in some of the old TV shows, the Black people were the drunks. They were the ones who overconsumed irresponsibly. It can also be connected to religion, right? Like the only element of which drinking was permissible was this concept around wine, and that's because what was happening agriculturally, they didn't always have purified wine, right? And so then there are purified water, excuse me. And so then they were able to drink this wine instead. But the Bible and our connections to the religion don't always allow for us to enjoy the spirits the way that we always want to, right? Because it's sometimes looked down upon. Talk to me a little bit about what it means to be Black in this industry, serving folks who have these very complex relationships with alcohol. Talk to me a little bit about what your experience has been. It may be behind the bar. It may be as you're having conversations with people. It may be at the corporate level where you're leading. But talk to me a little bit about the complexities of Blackness and our history of socialization around the consumption of spirits. And anyone, tell me where you want to go. Ariel, I see you unmuted. Just girl, you got something to say. Tell me what you got to say.
Well, I think if we're going to start a conversation about that, we have to key in on education. It's the more you know. If you don't know how to properly drink, and how to properly drink means that you know what you're drinking, how to drink it, when to drink it, what's socially acceptable, what is the social norm for the setting that you're in. Those are all things that play into hospitality. Someone has to teach you, and you have to be taught. Not to say that if you're drinking, you don't know what you're doing. What I'm saying specifically is we get instruction from our parents and our grandparents. So if we were talking about my grandparent, he enjoyed Chivas. That was his stuff. And he deserved to have as much as he liked when he liked it because he was the breadwinner. He went out, he worked, he did all that he needed to do, and this is what he wanted to enjoy. I don't recall him being, crazy drunk or anything like that. However, he did make some poor decisions when drinking. So if you see that, that's exactly what you're going to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so funny that you talk about that. Torrence and I and some of the homies have talked about the difference between aged liquor and unaged liquor, right? And when Torrence was doing a lesson for me, I was saying, I can't mess around with the brown liquor. That's what we call it at home, right? I can't mess around with the browns, the aged liquor, because I feel different. I feel to be vulnerable. I feel angry in those moments. I'm about to turn up the club. You know what I'm saying? Like, somebody gonna get it, right? They're really not, okay? Just leave me alone. They're really not gonna get it. But it's also when I was talking about it with Torrence, we were also talking about how some of these spirits are made and how they intersect with the chemicals that are naturally in your body, right? And so if there's too much sugar, maybe that sugar doesn't go well with me. If there were other ingredients in there, maybe it doesn't go well with me, and that's why I get these spikes in certain emotions or certain experiences based off of these spirits. But we have to be mindful enough to know what we're drinking and what the outcome of that is. What we're drinking and how it responds to our body. When you were first talking about your beverage, Ariel, you were saying that you're responsible and you want to know what you're actually putting in your body, because all alcohol is not the same. All spirits are not the same, and they don't interact with your body the same. So from a mental health perspective, it's about mindfulness. What are you consuming, and how is it intersecting with what's already in your body? Similar to medication, similar to food, all of this stuff is chemically based with the chemicals that we have in our body, and how is it intersecting together to give you the experience that you want to have at that time?
Well, simply put, spirits are a luxury of choice. This is a luxury. You can certainly function if you didn't drink, but why would you want to, right? We use spirits as a celebratory thing. We drink when we're happy. We drink when we're sad. We drink when someone is born. We drink when someone has passed. So it is a celebration. It didn't just start here. This is how the ancestors connected. By and large, yeah, absolutely. So, when we talk about what was available, water was not. It's not plentiful. I'm in a place now, well, not now, but I was in a place where you really had to be mindful of your showers. But let me tell you, tequila was there. There was tequila. There were no showers, but there was tequila. And so when you think about where these spirits are coming from and who's making them and why they're making them, it's a celebration of life, to be quite honest. And the reason why we're all connected, Tracy, Torrence, and I, is because we celebrate what people would love to do, which is, have these things, but have them on a regular basis. These things are not only just celebrations, but a part of the fabric in which we weave. This is how I get paid. So I want to teach people not only about the spirit in itself, but why we're drinking and how we're drinking, and how I've traveled the world doing these things. I'm connecting people through my cocktails, and I hope to do that for as long as possible. I've had to pivot and do some other things, but certainly if we put into perspective what we're doing and how we're doing it, you get an appreciation for spirits in general. Also, these things are not often cheap, right? And so if you really want to pay attention to what it is you're drinking, find out where it's made. Mm-hmm. Find out where it's made. Tracy can tell you a lot about whiskey, and certainly the things in which we're drinking have to be consumed at a rate that there was a place where it started. So whiskey isn't made in a day. Those things are sitting for years before they can come to market, to be quite honest. Mm-hmm. So absolutely. The price point is definitely an influence as well. And, the more we're drinking, the better we want, the higher quality we want. Torrence has things that cost hundreds of dollars. He won't let me have a lot of them, but he has some hundreds of dollars sitting on his shelf.
Stop putting my business in the street.
Which is amazing, right? And it's and truth be told, it's also a point of privilege where we can talk about having these sorts of things. But many of the folks that came before us didn't have access to the money the same way that we had. So when you talk about that we are reflections of what we've been taught, some of us are still drinking poor quality alcohol, not because we can't do something different, but because we don't know that there's something different.
It's nostalgic.
Right? I went into Torrence's house the other day, and he had his shelf, and I was like, you have to tell me about every single one of these. And when he was telling me, I was like, how is this happening? But I think, again, it's a matter of learned behavior. It's a matter of socialization. It's a matter of, like you talked about a second, Ariel, your grandfather was able to consume at different rates because of his socialization. He was the man in a particular generation of which he was able to do certain things, right? And it was an expectation that was there as well. And even when we talk about the spirituality behind it, even the term libation and how we use libation. I'm originally from Los Angeles, California, and we are known for this concept of pouring out a little liquor, right? We're gonna pour out a little bit. I lost my brother a couple weeks ago, but best be told, I pulled out a little bit of his favorite aged beverage, and I poured a little bit out outside, right? And I gave acknowledgement to who he was and what he liked to consume as well, because that's who we are as Black people. We downgrade it a little bit, but it's a spiritual element when we pour libation for our ancestors who have transitioned.
And
as
if
well.
I can chime in on that,
go ahead.
That is an African tradition that is also observed in Mexico. Mm-hmm. Before you consume mezcal, you pour some out. Mm-hmm. And I was blown away the first time I saw someone pour out some mezcal for the ancestors. Yes. I was completely done.
Yes. Yes. And Torrence, you were also going to talk a little bit about the African, your experience with Black people and beverages. I saw you unmuted yourself, and maybe the intersection as well.
I was just going to comment on what you were saying earlier about the biochemical reactions that happen with people based on certain spirits. But I was just going to mention that Tracy knows a whole lot about that, because she's operating with spirits on a molecular level now because of her training that she's in now. So I wanted to nudge Tracy to comment on that.
Well, honestly, that's not even where I wanted to take this, because I don't think that's what's important. Because I also think, though there are some chemicals that could differ because of the different types of sugars that are being broken down, creating different flavor compounds. Anyhow, what we need to talk about is the fact that spirits, like the first beer recipe, the first one that's written down is from Egypt. Some of the oldest brewery they've ever found is in Egypt. China would be the only one that's also been doing ferments and things for just as long. We know that one of the very first people to create any type of distillation device is a woman from basically Samaria, would have at that time, or Iraq. So that was, she created the 3-arm still, the Trabiki, which is still used today. And they were doing it for alchemy, right? They were trying to make gold. Then they started making perfumes. And then the Moors, for hundreds of years, had this knowledge. And the Moors are who brought this knowledge, this technology of distillation across Northern Africa and into Southern Europe. We are the root.
Yes.
So this is where I'm like, it's beyond. It's so far back. We are the root.
Yes. Tracy, you don't even know how excited you just made me. I had like tingles from the ancestors right there. You better talk about all of that, honey. Talk about it again. Say it again for the people back.
But that is something for me that I try to be very in touch with, the fact that nothing I do is new, that there have been men and women who've tried all these things before me that have bore the weight of this world, of the struggles, of these dreams that I have that have made this possible. And I look back how far we've been excellent, and how much we've brought, and how much that's been diminished by other stories being written on top of ours and ours being stripped. But we're still shining through. Yeah. And now we're starting to dig back and say, no, this is mine. I own this, and this is my heritage. And we're making everything more colorful. We're making everything a bit thicker, a bit that fabric is being woven back together in a way that no one will ever be able to tear it apart. And I'm really excited for us.
Yes.
Taking the magic back.
Yes.
Yeah. When you use that word alchemy, I was like, but isn't it still, right? Like, it's not what they intended at the time, but isn't it still where we get to talk about it in terms of celebrations and in terms of transitions of life, and we get to use these spirits in terms of whatever, right? Like when we've accomplished things and when we're doing different things, and as well. There is a component, of course, where sometimes, again, people are over consuming. Maybe they are, consuming when they're sad or consuming when they're angry. As a mental health professional, I recognize that anger is a secondary emotion, but they're consuming in a way because they don't necessarily know other things to do in the meantime, right? And so they're not consuming with the celebration that spirits are supposed to be used for. They're consuming because they don't have the coping skills at the time to do something else, right? And that's where that mental health piece comes in. But what I do like about spirits is how, again, there's this huge connection to the Black history, right? There's this huge connection to what we are doing. There's this huge connection to women's history, and not just like you said, in terms of how it all started, but also in terms of how we maintained it and how we kept it going, and even how we use spirits as healing mechanisms, right? So it's not just the celebration piece, but it's also the healing piece. It's also the soothing piece that comes in as well. And I love it. And that's why I was so excited to bring forth the conversation around spirits and mental health and spirits and Black history, right? Because it is so complex. It's not just going to the bar and ordering a drink because, we popping bottles or we doing this and that. It has so much more value to it as well. And if we slow down and we take this meditative approach around it, we can really appreciate what our ancestors were doing at the time that some of these things were being created or maintained, and what it meant for them and what it can possibly positively mean for us as well. So many conversations, right? So many thoughts. However, we are like over time, right? Like that's what this right here is magic too. This is alchemy as well, right? This is what happens when you bring all of these wonderful folks together. So I want to go ahead and give you guys an opportunity to say any last closing points, right? So like, what is something that you wish you would have said in this last hour that maybe you didn't have a chance to say just yet? And after you do that, I want you to give the folks your handles, right? Your social media handles, how they could get in contact with you. If they have questions around the science behind it, like Tracy mentioned, or they have questions around the connections to hospitality, like Ariel mentioned, or they have conversations around how to emerge into the industry, like Torrence mentioned. Let's go ahead and talk about that as well. So let's start with Tracy. and then we'll go to Ariel, and then we'll end out with Torrence.
Yeah, so thank you again. Thank you so much for having me. Torrence, thank you for making sure that we were all connected. I'm so incredibly honored to be here. This has been a great conversation. And for everyone watching, I hope that you're able to look upon spirits for the intent that they're created. They're meant to be enjoyed. They're meant to create relationships. They're meant to open your heart in a new way. And when you take time and you savor those flavors, and you take time and you think about the years, the energy, the passion that was put into that glass in front of you, I think it'll change the way that you use your spirits, and that's really what it's for. So I prefer whiskey because that's my thing, and Uncle Nearest being in honor of Nathan Nearest Green, I raise my glass to my ancestors and to all of you. Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers. Thank you so much, Tracy. I love talking with you.
I am spirited _ Tracy with an IE on Instagram. I do whiskey quizzes and facts, and I put all my knowledge that I can out there for everybody else to learn. So please feel free to follow along and ask questions.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Spirited Tracy. I appreciate you coming on with me and spilling the tea as well. Or was it tea that we were drinking? Who knows? Go ahead, Ariel.
Well, I also am very grateful for Spirited Tracy because I get a lot of my whiskey knowledge and some of my, I look to a lot of people in the industry, especially people that I can grab, touch, and hold. And Tracy has definitely been one of those people, but she definitely helps me get some inspiration. And within the last, I think 4 months, I got my American whiskey certification. So I am a whiskey steward, and it has been amazing. These people drop bottles at my front door and make me taste these things. And I wish I would have did it earlier. That's all I can say. But what I would like to say is spend some time with the spirit of choice that you like. Find out why you like it. One of bartenders' pet peeves is having a person order and then the next person behind them go, I'll just have what she's having. Not knowing anything about what the spirit is, why the spirit is, anything like that. Spend some time with whiskey. If you like cognac, spend some time. And if you have the opportunity, go to the place in which it's made. If you're going to cognac, you're going to France, and that is a fun trip. But if you love whiskey, I invite you and I challenge you to go to the Bourbon Trail, go to Uncle Nearest in Tennessee. Go there. It's a beautiful. You will learn so many things, and you'll get an appreciation. And I really want people to spend time learning about what they're eating and drinking because it's important. It's important right now because COVID hit and you all are not allowed to drink and eat certain things. That was not that's by a plan. Somebody had a plan for us to fail. Somebody had a plan for us to not have great things. Find out what you're drinking so you can have it all the time. I am Leira Knows Cocktails on Instagram, and you can also follow me on Facebook as well.
Now, Ariel, how you gonna say something like that at the end of the segment, right? Like COVID told us that we can't eat and drink like that's a now I gotta go back and we gonna have to have a whole nother spilling the tea with Dr. P because I'm like,
could you please?
About, girl?
Could you please?
I will.
Could you please? I want to get way into it because in some of our neighborhoods, me being from Chicago, we still have huge food disparities. It's and people don't think that because it's like, oh well, it's Chicago. But that's for another time and place. Please invite me back. I would love.
Now you got the whole team. We sitting over here with our wheels turning and stuff like that. Because Black History Month, Women's History Month is just around the corner. Now I gotta bring y'all back and we gotta talk about the women's history. You know what? Never mind. We're gonna do that later. Don't be offended, Torrence. If you, I love you though.
Hey, it's y'all time.
Okay. Okay. It's your turn, brother. Go ahead. Tell us what you wish we would have been able to talk about or some lasting closing points and how to reach you.
I'll start by saying I'm very grateful for Ariel. She's like my everyday, she's my adult. We both have a lot of mentees or like bar babies. So that's my adult. That's the person I can have grown folks talk with. And Tracy, I'm overwhelmingly just grateful for you too. The first time I met Tracy, she came sweeping into Bourbon Steak for a Glenfiddich dinner, and she was like, "Hi, how are you?" I was like, "Well, who is this black lady for the Scotch representing a Scotch internationally? What?" And she was so genuine. I'll never forget that day. I also will never forget the fact that I had to make 36 hot toddies 20 minutes after I got into my shift, because no one told anybody that we was having hot toddies, but we made it happen, and it was beautiful. I think the one thing that I would wanted to say is, because it's a touchy subject talking about spirits and mental health, but the thing is, it's anything that you use externally to cope can be a problem. Whether it's food, working out, what have you, right? We know that coping and navigating through life is an internal process. And whenever we incorporate something that's outside of ourselves to continue that process moving forward, then it becomes a slippery slope, right? So yes, we can be of good mental health and consume responsibly. Some of us cannot, because we have been designated with certain problems, and that's okay too, right? That's why we have a whole new growing segment of non-alcoholic spirits, right? Yes. So people can continue to consume the things that they like, but not necessarily be subject to the effects that they suffer from. So I just wanted to say that, I know that I don't drink when I'm in any extreme of emotion. Yes. So, and I would advise anyone that's around me in my circle to not do that as well, because it can be very, very much a dangerous thing to do. So I'm very grateful to be in this business, to be a Black person representing and not only creating a success for myself, but creating opportunities for other people that look like me.
Yes, absolutely. Torrence, how did they get in contact with you, brother?
Oh, it's my handle on Instagram is Brother Agave, and that's in the Queen's English. It's no Brother Agave, no spaces, no dots, anything.
All right. This is perfect. This completely even exceeded what I wanted, right? We got a chance to talk about so much, and yes, there's still so much more that we can talk about when it comes to spirits, and it comes to mental health, and it comes to the intersections, as you heard from Tracy and Ariel, so much when it comes to how women were involved in the process, right? And when we talk about the mental health pieces, like Torrence has talked about, there's so many different alternative and options in the event that you're not a person who really enjoys the spirits, or you have some limitations that are there, because we should have limitations on everything in life. Nothing should be overly consumed, because that's not how we were designed. That's not how we were made, right? Of course, representing Onyx Therapy Group, if you believe that there's elements of your life of which you may be over consuming, or you have people in your life who are overly consuming, reach out to us. We're here to help, and we're here to support in all aspects, in all ways. I'm so excited to have you guys here. I'm so excited to see these beautiful brown faces as we're talking about our spirits, and we're talking about it in terms of our very special Black History Month, right? And it's just a month that we get to talk about it, but it's so much more ingrained in our life on everyday decisions, whether it's rum or whiskey or mezcal or whatever the case may be. If it's pouring libations, if it's doing altars, this is all part of who we constantly, daily are, and how we represent ourselves. So this particular video and this particular conversation, of course, is aired on LinkedIn and aired on Facebook, but it'll also be aired on our YouTube page, which is Onyx Therapy Group, and it'll also be shared with with Torrence, Ariel, and Tracy, so that they can share the information as well, because it's been a very rich conversation. As Black people are, we are rich in so many different ways and magical in so many different ways. I encourage you all to drink responsibly, not just those of us that are on the call, because I'm sure you guys do, but for anybody who's listening and anybody who will watch later, that what we're promoting here is the history behind these spirits. We're promoting the senses, the sensory element behind these experiences. We're promoting the community behind these spirits. We're promoting how we bring ourselves together behind these spirits. We're promoting our own selves and how we get to connect with the spirits as we consume these spirits. So thank you for being with us. Of course, I am Dr. Plummer, and on IG, I am Mahogany Sunshine. If you can't tell, I believe that I'm about sunshine, right? Bright and bubbly and all the things. And then, of course, we have Onyx Therapy Group, which is the company that I get to have the honor of being the CEO of, and that is Onyx Therapy Group on IG and on Facebook. And we are also on our website, of course, onyxtherapygroup.com. On Onyx Therapy Group, you're also going to find some recipes for some great cocktails made by Torrence. You're going to also find some recipes. You're also going to find some different books. You're also going to find different ways that you can cope with yourselves as well. So I hope that you go and visit that page and you tell other folks about how to promote mental health in our Black community as well. Thank you, Torrence, my brother. I love you deep, 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 deep down in my heart. I appreciate you, and thank you so much for connecting me with Tracy. Tracy, you are amazingly intelligent. Oh my God, I love it. And you know, as a Delta, I am feeling that blazer too, honey. You are giving me all the life today. Thank you, baby. And to Ariel, who I am jealously envious of as she sits in Mexico and I'm in the cold East Coast. I appreciate you so much for spending time with us in a different time zone and teaching us about many of the things that you know, knowing that there's so much more that you have for us as well. So I appreciate you all, and I hope you have a good night as well. Thank you.
Good night.